watching TVP World's special coverage from the Globsec Forum in Prague, and with me now is Kurt Volker, the former United States Special Representative for Ukraine negotiations. Thank you for your time.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Can I start with the developing story in the Middle East, Israel attacking Iran? What do you make of that?
Well, it's a little too early to really draw some conclusions. I think first off, Israel has made it clear that it will not accept the idea that Ukraine has its own indigenous uranium enrichment capability, because that creates too big a risk that Iran would develop a nuclear bomb. So that's why they're doing this. They've said that they'll continue these attacks as long as necessary. I assume that Iran will respond, and we have to see what that response looks like, whether that escalates into a much larger conventional conflict, or whether it is tit for tat and dies down again, as happened before. Also, what was interesting was the Trump administration's public statement about this, where they said, essentially, this wasn't us, we had nothing to do with this, Iran, please don't launch any terrorist attacks against us. That is a surprisingly weak posture from the United States, which will send a signal to lots of people, to not only to the Iranians as a weak posture and that Israel is more isolated, but to China, to Russia, and it could actually be emboldening for some of these other authoritarian aggressors around the world. On the other hand, if this does escalate into a larger conflict, if Israel engages Iran in a significant conventional war, it could actually weaken Iran, and the U.S. would have to back Israel in that circumstance. So it may actually end up with U.S. showing resolve and Iran getting weaker and less able to support Russia, for example. So we have a long way to see how this plays out.
Is there any significance around the timing? The US was set to engage another round of talks with Iran this week.
Yeah, I think so. I think that is significant. Donald Trump in his first term put maximum pressure on Iran and insisted on zero enrichment. And that's where he was for the first few months of the second term as well. But now, having put forward a proposal that would accept limited enrichment by Iran domestically, I think Israel found that there is too great a risk to Israel to allow that to continue. We already know the Democrats in the U.S. support that. If a Republican administration were to do that too, Israel would be confronted with a nuclear-armed Iran eventually, and so they felt the time to act is as soon as possible.
I want to turn to the conflict in Ukraine, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Obviously, you were heavily involved in the peace process and the negotiations there. Take me inside Donald Trump's thinking right now. Why does he appear to be giving Vladimir Putin the benefit of the doubt, and then he swings one way and then he swings back to Mr. Putin?
I think that he is doing what a lot of American presidents have done, which is to mirror image. They imagine themselves in Putin's position and say, what would I do? And in Donald Trump's case, he would say, I don't want to lose all these lives, I would end the war, I would get the sanctions lifted, I would make a lot of money. And so he thinks that that would be attractive to Putin. So he's both surprised and frustrated that Putin is not thinking that way. Putin is thinking in terms of history, legacy, territory, empire, something that Trump is not after. And so he's very frustrated that Putin is not responding to his efforts to generate a ceasefire. He doesn't want to confront Putin directly, because he feels that if he does, he's really losing the opportunity to make a deal with Putin. I don't agree with that, but I think that's his understanding or his philosophy there as well. And what we may see now is that the Congress may force the U.S. into a tougher position. We see 80-some senators all having co-sponsored legislation to impose very tough sanctions.
500% tariffs.
Yeah, 500% tariffs. Crippling sanctions on secondary sanctions, so that we try to shut down Russia's sanctions evasion, which could have a very significant impact on their state budget. And if Putin finds that he can't afford to keep going without risking the Russian state, that, I think, is the best chance for a ceasefire.
What is the politics of that bill? Lindsey Graham introduced it, as you say, There's about 80 senators that support it, but President Trump has to endorse it, right?
I think Republican senators have indicated that they support it, they're ready to pass it, but they don't want to be doing it against Donald Trump. They want to be doing it as a way of strengthening the American position, strengthening Donald Trump's hand as he tries to get a ceasefire, which means they want a signal from Trump that it's okay, go ahead. And I don't think they've gotten that signal yet. They may or they may not ever get it. And I think that they will eventually decide we have to act in order to do this. I know that Lindsey Graham speaks with Donald Trump. I know they have a good relationship. So my personal expectation is that we will get a green light and he will go forward.
Is there a way that Donald Trump kind of gets to maintain his relationship with Vladimir Putin, but allows Congress to pass that sanctions bill, and it makes him look like less like the bad cop?
Yeah, good cop, bad cop. And I think that that is quite possible. I think what he would do with 80-some senators voting in favor is tell Putin, look, what can I do? If I veto it, they override the veto anyway. I've given you every opportunity to go for a ceasefire, and you haven't done it. So I would still like to do that, but we've got to implement these sanctions now.
Briefly on NATO, America sort of straying away from Europe, including putting pressure on the EU when it comes to defence. I want to talk about the NATO deterrence. Can the eastern flank, the likes of Lithuania, Latvia, indeed Poland and Finland, be confident that America would come to their aid if Russia launched a broader attack, which Mark Rutte is warning could happen in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think it depends on the nature of the attack, to be honest. A proper conventional military attack against a NATO ally, yes. I think it would cause such a response in the United States and a demand for the administration to act that even if Trump was uncomfortable, there would be such a clamor to respond in such a case. But what is more likely and more concerning to me is limited attack, hybrid attacks, just a little land grab in some place where Putin claims that is justified, as he started with the war in Ukraine. And he could do that in Lithuania or Estonia. And I think there would be an instinct not only in the Trump administration, but in many, many capitals in Europe to say, oh, well, we shouldn't escalate. We don't want to get into an all-out conflict with Russia over this. And the problem there is it's a slippery slope. Once you fail to defend NATO territory anywhere, you're sending a message to Putin that now it's all negotiable.
NATO summit, end of the month. How crucial is that summit for NATO to establish itself in the current discourse, if you like, and to ensure that everyone believes in the NATO deterrence, that everyone believes that NATO can support Ukraine in some way, shape or form?
The good news is I think that this summit is teed up to be successful, but you're right to highlight the stakes of this summit. If NATO were not to agree to a 5% target of defense spending going forward, I think you would lose the United States' commitment to NATO over time. There'd just be a feeling that Europe is not serious about its own security, so why should we keep compensating for that and spending money over top of that? But with Europe agreeing to this high defense spending target and taking responsibility for security in Europe, it's going to strengthen NATO, and it's going to make the U.S. more respectful of our European allies and more committed to European allies, because it will be a more even bargain.
Kurt Volker, always a pleasure. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
And that's all for this exclusive interview here on TVP World from the GlobSec Forum in Prague. I'm Aaron Dahmen. Goodbye for now.